You know your story. You know what you've been through. You know who you are and what you are. You know what life could be like, what it may have been like, what it might be like without a spiritual practice. But for each one of us, the source of our being, the God of all life, is everywhere present with an invitation. An invitation to listen and to respond and to step in with faith to our healing and to our wholeness. We don't have to have all the answers. We simply have to be willing to take the next step or the first step. You know that song I was thinking, the first cut is the deepest. Maybe the first step is the most terrifying. And to allow moments of terror to become our moments of transformation. Because we're listening and we're raw, unique, unrepeatable expressions of the source. And we have woken up to the contemplative path, to a path that the world outside of us doesn't offer, and it doesn't define, and it can't lead us into, and it can't nourish, and it can't nurture. But only God can, only Source can. And spiritual leaders throughout time, spiritual sages and saints, practitioners, Jesus, the master teacher, took this step, took that terrifying step to not go to the world for confirmation, for affirmation, not to start building up things from the world, but to take that unsettledness that we have inside, to take the discord, to take whatever it is, whatever is terrifying, whatever seems like it's falling apart, whatever it is, you fill in the blank, but to take all of that and to recognize it's not going to be satiated by how much I accumulate. It's not going to be satiated by how much I accomplish. It's not going to be satiated by the success of the world outside of me and what labels it puts on my life. It's not going to be satiated by the type of relationships or family or whatever it is, day to day, whatever it is that the world offers. It's not going to be satiated by my shopping. I know, bummer. Myrtle Fillmore, and it's funny, we talk about Charles, if you know our co-founders, Charles and Myrtle, but we talk about Charles so much, but Myrtle had an awakening here, and in Eric Butterworth's book, Unity, A Quest for Truth, he kind of talks about unity and what is the real beginning of unity. And he says this, he says, it's not easy to mark one date as the beginning of unity. It started as a movement in the minds of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, two earnest searchers for truth whose lives were spent in a relentless quest through religions and philosophies of the world. If we must settle on one particular movement as the starting point of what we today think of as the unity movement, we might say it was in Kansas City in the spring of 1886. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, facing physical and financial crises that seemed insurmountable, attended a lecture by Dr. E.B. Weeks, who was a representative of the Illinois Metaphysical College, then headed by Emma Curtis Hopkins. Do you hear that? Financial and physical crisis. We have a bunch of beloveds online, some who have never been to the grounds, But if you drove onto the grounds today, you saw them. You drove through this gorgeous, almost neon green. You may have seen deer and fox, but you saw hundreds and hundreds of acres of gorgeous land filled with hiking trails, filled with lakes, a golf course, a bookstore, a cafe, buildings, a prayer network, a publishing house, a spiritual community, rose gardens, fountains. On the brink of financial disaster and physical healing crisis, Crazy Carl alluded to one of his deep awakening moments. It probably feels like it matches that moment. You have yours, I have mine. Maybe it's one moment, maybe it's a roller coaster. Can even that be used? Can even that be turned into something? Can even that be turned around? Can even that be transformed? And how? That's what unity was founded on, not to be its own religion, but to be a practice that makes any religion practical, that makes it so we're not just walking in the door on a Sunday morning and then going back to our lives alone, but makes it so that we're walking in the door on a Sunday morning and there's a deepening, a quickening, an expansion, a consciousness that is growing in us that leads us to more consciously and intentionally plant seeds. Because we have 100 years. We're standing on 100 years. We may get 100 years, we may not on this planet. But what are we going to do with our 100 years? Are we going to just spread and plant seeds that we're not aware of, that are not intentional? Or are we going to be awake as much as possible? Something strange happened to Myrtle Fillmore at this time. It was no mystical experience or emotional conversion. It was simply that she left the lecture a new, different, liberating, transforming conviction. That as she left the lecture, a new, different, liberating, transforming conviction was blazing in her heart and mind. A new conviction was blazing in her heart and mind. If you know her story, you know it's about her healing and her almost resurrection of the body. But at the truth and at the depth of the practice, it's about wholeness. It's about realizing and recognizing that God is love, that we live in a friendly universe, that it's all connected, that everything we need is right here, right now, in this present moment. If we call on it, if we lean into it, if we stop taking every bit of our eyes and looking to the outer for our confirmation, for our affirmation. Amen. When we do that, we just keep seeking, right? It's like if she'd gone to the supplement store instead of a spiritual workshop, and she just came home with bags and bags and bags of supplements. Let me just keep trying to put more in, put more in, put more in, rather than drawing the Christ presence out. We're all planting seeds. Unfortunately, so many of the seeds that we plant are seeds of resentment, the things that we can't forgive, limited thinking that we pass on generationally. But think about this 100 years. I mean, think about where Charles and Myrtle were when they stood on this property, when they stood in that talk. Think about where we are as a world, where you are as an individual. What are we here for? What's real? What's real is everything within us reminding us that we are whole and holy, and that this moment is a holy moment. Jesus, the master teacher, talked about sowing seeds a lot, yeah? Charles and Myrtle didn't hand you, this spiritual community, these grounds, because they strong-armed the universe. Because they looked at their investments and said, how could we right outside of Kansas City accumulate the largest piece of property and make sure it's there through the Depression, through wars, through this, through that, through leaders, through all the craziness that organizations have to deal with, through all the interestingness that goes on in the world up and down. They did it through one simple thing. One of my classmates from ministerial school, his name's Bobby Enyart, he always used to say, truth is simple. All these talks, and he would complain about the sermons, all the sermons, because he had to sit through all of our sermons. He's like, all this hogwash, all this la, 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 la. He said, it might not be easy, but it's always simple. Because it's not about chasing all this stuff. It's not about doing all this stuff in the outer. It's about one thing. It's about the contemplative practice. It's about bringing it back home to the heart, to the center of your being. It's about moving from here. It's about getting the approval from here. It's about standing in here. It's about listening to right here. And listening is all we have to do. Is that not good news? You listened. We listen. And we step forward in faith, the perceiving power of mind linked with the ability to shape substance. That's what Charles Fillmore called faith. Can we remind ourselves every time the world seems more complicated, our lives seem more complicated, every time we have that part of ourselves, that aspect of being that says, what have I done with my 100 years? Am I even important? Have I done anything? What is this? It's not about you. It's not about me. We are all part of a collective consciousness, a growing movement of consciousness that is love, that is Godness. It's sometimes called the Christ. It's sometimes called the anointed presence. It's sometimes called the awakening. But it's simple. It's maybe not easy because there are so many distractions. There are so many other places to go, to seemingly be entertained or nourished or distracted. We can chase life and we can try to build it, or we can live it. And trust that we are divinely created with more than enough to take the first step, even if we're terrified, even if we don't know the answers, we don't know how, but with one dedication to be part of the cumulative consciousness of love. And breathing into that step forward, aware of the seeds we plant. It is vital that we be aware of the seeds we plant. In the book Things to Be Remembered, Lowell Fillmore says this: the reason why it is possible to foretell the future is that the seeds of the future are planted by man. A man who can see the relation between cause and effect therefore becomes a prophet, since he can foresee what kind of crop will be reaped by studying the seeds that are being planted by men. The reason why it is possible to foretell the future is that the seeds of the future are planted by man. A man who can see the relation between cause and effect, therefore becomes a prophet, since he can foresee what kind of crop will be reaped by studying the seeds being planted by men. He shares this affirmation: today I am planting a new garden in my consciousness. Today we are planting a new garden in our consciousness. It matters not. Reverend Jim Blake and I were talking about this on Friday night at the 100-year anniversary. Sometimes the outer world does not reassure us that all is well. We must listen to the inner world. That's what Jesus taught. I mean, really think about the master teacher for a moment. Like, from conception to Christed consciousness to lifting off into the freedom form, that journey, that walk. And seeds were planted that are still sown today. Think about being here with seeds planted that are still sown today. If we look to the outer for our affirmation and confirmation, we often stop. We often get distracted. We often sow seeds, plant seeds that we really don't want to reap. Right? I mean, how much of our lives is intentional if you think about it, really? How much of our time is spent intentionally? How much of our conversation, how much of our word, our sound is intentional? All you have to do is take the next step. And the next step is to listen for each one of us. When we don't listen, we don't always see that we may be ahead of our time, that we may be birthing something beyond what has been birthed before. You know, on this grounds in the early 1900s, they fed thousands of people each week with farm-to-table food, healthy food, grown on the land, apple orchards, pies, vegetarian food, right? I mean, tons of people, more people than are here right now. We had the longest running children's magazine, children's publication, We Wisdom. Longest running. But what happens throughout time? What does humanity do? What does the individual do? The individual goes, are there people here right now? Do people want it? Maybe we should stop the magazine. Maybe we should stop the publishing. Maybe we should stop the restaurant. Maybe we should stop the church. You know how many spiritual communities said during the past 3 years, maybe we should just stop the church. Maybe I should flee. Have you ever had that thought in your life? Maybe I should flee. Maybe I should either take something else out, take everything out around me, or take myself somewhere else. Because what I'm seeing in my outside world doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like I'm getting the feedback that things are good. But the contemplative practice says stop looking out there and start listening in here. In our beautiful world, people have been standing for the right to be themselves, to listen to themselves, to follow their own heart. And when I say listen to themselves, I mean listen to God, the divine self, the highest self. Listen through that part of self that they know their own nature so well, that they know they are safe in God. They know they can trust that voice. And no matter what the world outside them says, as long as you have that confirmation and that affirmation, you are safe to take the next step, even if it's terrifying. And trust that those seeds are being planted. It says, here is the seed I am planting. I am one with infinite love and wisdom, and all of my affairs are in divine order. He goes on to say, remember that although God's word created your spirit, your own words are creating your soul. You're adding something to your soul every day by your words and thoughts, making it better or worse, weaker or stronger, more fearful or more courageous, more ignorant or wiser, more common or more beautiful, more hateful or more loving, more deceitful or more honest and true. Your spirit was created in God's own image and likeness by his word. But he has left the job of forming your soul to you. You must mold it according to your own words and thoughts. You must plant the seed. Michael Singer, the author, said these words. Take a deep breath with me. The highest life you can live is when every single moment that passes before you is better off because it did. You are part of the cumulative consciousness that is the Christ's presence, that is love itself. Namaste. Let's breathe into a time of meditation, just allowing ourselves to relax into this moment. Taking a few inhales and exhales. Opening up the heart center. Letting whatever is up for you today to be up. And allowing all of those complications, all of those thoughts, all of the looking and reaching and stretching to the outer world to simply be set aside for a moment. To remember that truth is simple. God is love. All that's being asked of me is to listen and take the next step. Give me this day my daily bread. Forgive me all my trespasses and lead me not into dismay, but let me pray upon the highest hill. Let me know the beauty of thy will, and from it let me not stray, but deliver me from negativity. We simply relax, remembering our true nature, and that it's more than enough to lean into that. Though the world may tell us to reach to the outer for affirmation, confirmation, accolades, resources, answers, guidance, engagement, attention. The truth is, it is simple. The guidance system is written within your own heart. The great source of your being created the spiritual infrastructure within you, within me, within all of life, to bring forth all that is needed in this moment. We may not get the map, the plan, the list, the supplies at the time that our sense of separation wants it, our sense of ego, our sense of need. But none of that is necessary. All that is necessary is that we listen. Take the first step. Go directly to God. Trust in spiritual resource, our spiritual source, the light within us and among us, to guide us and direct our ways in each and every moment. And with a deep inhale and exhale, we just allow our shoulders to roll back, remembering that this practice is more than enough. This practice is the bold practice. It takes everything, because it is one thing: leaning into spirit. Breathing into the silence. We allow ourselves to come home. And so it is.